Advisory Commission to order at 4:03 PM. Colin, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Gallardi?
Here.
Commissioner Morrison?
Here. Sorry.
Commissioner Borgsdorf? Commissioner Ramaswamy? Commissioner London?
Here.
Commissioner Apple?
Here.
Commissioner Kraut? Commissioner Skylus?
Here.
And Councilmember Hayner?
Here.
And Councilmember Grand.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Colin.
Steve.
Moving on to item 3, approval of the agenda. You have the agenda before you. Does anyone have any motions for changes? Or is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I
Move.
second.
Okay, motion by Bob, seconded by Rachel. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 4, first public comment. We welcome any members of the public to speak. Each member of the public has 3 minutes to address PAC. You're welcome to step up to the microphone, and please just make sure that you sign in.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is James Demore, and, 17 years ago, I sat in your chair. I was once a Parks Commissioner in my own right. And I saw on your agenda today that you have a Land Acquisition Committee meeting. I want to talk about the fact that not often someone comes up to the podium and says, I made a mistake. But I did so. And here's why. 17 years ago, we considered what is now the Ma property, which is, I believe, 3365 Jackson Road, but it is essentially the Lockwood development that we've all heard about in the past several months. We turned that property down for acquisition for 3 reasons. One, there was an existing house on the property. It hadn't strong as natural features as other important parcels that we were in consideration at that time. Lastly, we had much lesser means to pursue land acquisitions than what you do today, because the Greenbelt millage, as approved in 2003, wasn't even yet on the horizon, wasn't even being openly discussed. And we had to make some hard decisions, and this was one where we said no. Seeing everything that has transpired in the past several years, I would say that we indeed made a mistake. And I had been looking at this property for some time. Even though I don't live in the neighborhood, I think Dolph Park is a magnet park for all of Ann Arbor residents. And I'm very familiar with the property and even toured some of the more lesser known parts of the property. I think we need to rectify that mistake. I don't know where you all are in the process. I don't know where you are in terms of what priorities you're looking at in terms of acquisitions, whether you're unwilling to pursue acquisitions on the basis of density issues, et cetera, other things that you're looking at. I really think that you should have no questions about considering the property now. The home is long gone. This has a prime viewscape that this community lacks in so many other areas. Its proximity to Dolph, obviously, and having the park in a more natural form or a limited form would less disturb the sister lake that's underneath it. Lastly, its proximity to the Gelman Plume. I don't know what's going on or what's on your plate. That's the nature of the beast in terms of Land Acquisition Committee. But I strongly urge you to really move forward. I think we have an opportunity here to look at Dolph Park. And let's rectify a mistake that mine and my peers made back in 2003. And folks, thanks for considering my comments.
Thank you for coming today. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, approval of the minutes from the August 20th, 2019 PAC meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Lauren,
Second.
seconded by Stephen. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Item 6, presentations. Item 6A, we have Harry Sheehan, who is a Chief Deputy, Washtenaw County Water Resources, to talk to us about the Huron Hills Stormwater Project. So, welcome.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm here to introduce a CIP project that is in the stormwater realm. It's a collaboration between City of Ann Arbor Parks, Ann Arbor Golf Course, and Washtenaw County. And I'm going to call it, it's on Huron Hills Golf Course. I'm going to call the creek that goes through it Huron Hills Creek, even though it doesn't have a name right now. But when it becomes a county drain, it will. So that's a place to start. The very brief presentation is a background, plus goals and objectives, adding a construction timeline, talking about the funding for the project, what the expectations could be post-project, and then questions and answers. Project team, who mostly is here, from City of Ann Arbor, Doug Kelly, Andrew Walton, Victor Morales-Rios from the golf arena, Scott Spooner from Parks, Jennifer Lawson from Systems Planning, and myself. Here's the outline of Huron Hills Golf Course. It's got the front 7 and the back 11, and bisecting it south to north is Huron Parkway, and then coming off from the east is Huron River Drive. And if you'll notice, that creek comes out of a culvert across Huron River Drive and crosses through 7, 1, 2, and 5, the fairways. And that goes into the pond at Gallup Park. But the creek used to flow pretty much through the neighborhood before it was developed, the township neighborhood, and then all the way up through the back few holes of the golf course. And demonstrating that, here's a picture from 1947, and right there you can kind of see the outline of the original creek and it going through the woods there across Huron Parkway. And this is what it looks like today. It's kind of a skinny little creek, facilitates water movement through the course and a quick bridge across, a short span bridge across, so it's not much of a feature right now. And it's got a little bit more wetland down toward the downstream end by the railroad tracks. And up on the 12, 13, 14, 15 holes in that area, there really is no defined channel, or at least there isn't the intent there. This is kind of what it looks like today. It's somewhere between a ditch and a creek, I would say. It doesn't have a whole lot of profile there for water to run through the channel and for the channel to convey the water and the energy that goes through it in a stable fashion. And it looks like it could use to make up its mind about whether it's a creek or whether it's a lawn, because it's kind of got grasses going all the way down to the bottom. And it is a prime candidate for kind of creating a low base flow channel and then kind of a little bit of a base or a bench for a floodplain shelf, and opening up the profile of it a little bit. It's cutting into the bank and undercutting the roots of this walnut tree between Fairway 7 and Huron River Drive. And the wetland downstream is okay, but it could use some additional floristic quality, some diversity. And up on the back, it is starting to create its own channel through here. You can see water features and the creek trying to recreate itself. And it's got a lot of saturation in this part of the course. And up on 14, there's a pond that's kind of a settling pool for stormwater coming from the neighborhood through the stormwater system, but it doesn't create a whole lot of water quality improvement. It's an opportunity for us to do a lot more. And visually, it's not fantastic either. So the problem statement is essentially that we have a stream channel that's eroded in the front 7. It's starting to erode in the back as well. We have the vegetative buffer is minimal. There's not a whole lot of plant diversity. There's turf grass going right down into the water. There's a loss of channel and wetlands in the back 11. There's just an opportunity to recreate a system of wetlands with a low flow channel. There's flooding and saturation. It's just in areas it's just not very well drained. And there's limited stormwater detention for that water coming out of the storm sewer system and limited water quality treatment. So the goals are functional, ecological, and recreational. We'd like to add detention and slow stuff down. We'd like to get some sediment and phosphorus removal and improve habitat. And on the recreational side, we believe there's a pretty good opportunity to create an amenity, a natural feature through the park that adds to the visual aesthetic of the park, or the golf course, and improves play. So the objectives for this design are to recreate the channels and wetlands, create a model for conditions to develop an appropriately sized cross-section to stabilize the creek and the banks, create a creek profile that works for flow in low flow and flow in high flow, and store and slow rainfall and snow melt. And we would like to address bank erosion that adds sediment and phosphorus into the Huron River. We would like to include ideas from the public as feasible and possible, improve safety of play on the course, and limit construction to the non-peak season. So if we hit all those, we'll call it a success. The schedule begins 2 weeks from today. There's a public meeting for kickoff. We have an RFP out for design through our office. We should have someone on board by October 11th latest. And we're hoping to have 50% plans done in January and final plans ready for bid in May. Construction would start right after Labor Day in September of 2020. We would work through whatever winter season we have until we're shut down, get as much done as we can, and then wrap it up in the spring of 2021 and restabilize and replant. The funding for the project, it's a finance project through the State Revolving Fund, which is how we've done some other projects with parks in the past. It's a low-interest 20-year loan fund. It's done through the full faith and credit of the county and under the county drain. But eventually, the principal and interest payments would be borne by the stormwater utility. There's likely to be some non-eligible items, and we would get into that later. I think the first thing that I see is maybe some of those bridge spans would not fit completely into a water quality component of that cost share. And then post-project, what we can expect, we have an example on a much larger scale on Traver Creek, the Traver Creek section that runs through Leslie Park Golf Course. We did a project there in the winter of 12-13, and where we had similarly a county drain and a creek that had some erosion and some flow and capacity issues. And a couple of ponds that needed dredging as well. So we started construction that winter. We were working in the stream channel, in the ponds. We were working very close to fairways and tees and holes, working to improve flow through those areas to allow them to drain properly, give the channel the space it needed, and not absorb too much of the fairway into the project. So we could have a creek that could handle the low flows, and you can see it has kind of a gradually increasing floodplain area, so it has quite a bit of cross-section for larger flows, which you do get at Leslie Park Golf Course. That was part of the problem originally. There's a little bit of a high flow there. It has a lot of step pools where the creek actually drops quite a bit through the golf course, so we had to put in some energy dissipation structures. And then we restabilized it the following year. Comes up slowly the first year, starts to fill in. Scott probably took this picture a couple years later. There's one of the energy dissipation structures, and you got that nice natural creek course going through the golf course and providing a very sharp separation, a distinction between the fairway and out of play. And there's a creek kind of seamlessly working its way through the golf course. Seamlessly if you can hit the ball over it, I assume. It's not what I'm successful at. And some amenities where you were able to take this project and, on hole number 17, people would often trudge out into the water and grab their ball. And this addition of a wall at 17 allowed us to make a clean break between what was in play and what was not. And you always have extra fill on a project like this because you're making the creek bigger. So if you have good dirt, you have the ability to raise some tee boxes, some fairways that are wet and poorly drained. and use some of the more organic soils to create buffers between the fairways. That is what we'll aim to do. We'll have a wildlife assessment in Leslie Park. We had to move some turtles to a different pond during construction and have them make their way back afterwards. And there is the course, the creek work that we did at Leslie, winding its way through 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And you can see that in this case, I mean, this is a more exaggerated example of what we would be able to accomplish on a much smaller creek at Huron Hills. But, you know, you could add sinuosity, add capacity to the creek. You can have that connected buffered floodplain where you have stormwater storage and wildlife habitat, and you just create an area that's clearly out of play and something that was probably too wet to play anyway. And that would be it. That's just an introduction. More to come after we have some public input and some design elements going. Yeah, we're planning to stay on track.
Great. Thank you. Are there any questions from PAC? Bob?
Yeah, is the only opportunity, how are you gonna get public, input? I'm seeing October 1st, is that it?
Yeah, so October 1st is before the consultants get on board. In the RFP, there are two more public meetings.
Oh,
There's three public meetings with city, county, parks folks at 10%, 50%, and 90% design. And then at about 50% and maybe 90%, there'll be another public meeting. That's in the RFP.
We'll also be reaching out to people through social media and all of the contacts that we actually have at the golf course for leagues and season pass holders, et cetera.
Great. Lauren?
Do you have an idea whether you'd like to recreate the creek in the more full sort of designation, or whether you're going to keep it to, do you have an idea of what the flow levels would support on that?
Yeah, so that's part of the modeling process, so they'll do the hydrology and the hydraulics of that. So I would expect that where we have the ability to expand the profile, we would have more of a V-shaped or a stepped up shape, so that we can have additional capacity through the channel, and it won't, you won't have that flooding over the banks and into the fairways. But you got to work that in with the crossings as well, so there'll be narrow sections and wider sections. We would like to definitely recreate what was there or something similar back in 1947 on the back, where right now it's just, I think it's just underdrained mostly.
If you actually want, there's a good.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah. Thank you, Colin. So this is a drone video taken of the Traver Creek project. And this project included, if you get far enough up, there's a creek, a tributary to the creek that was buried for years and years and years, and we opened that up and created a second channel through the golf course. I think it's just coming up.
Stephen, did you have a question?
Yeah, more in the direction of a comment, that in my experience playing the course this summer, there was a ton of standing water. I think it was particularly on 15. It sort of created its own water hazard up there. And so what I think I heard you say was this work would potentially alleviate some of those issues with the standing water in the back part of the course.
Yeah, it was an unusual year, but there is, now I'm going to turn this off because I don't know what follows on YouTube.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know whose profile this might be.
That's not how to lubricate.
Close all tabs. There we go.
Thank you.
I had nothing
So yeah, part of this would be a collaboration between the folks at the golf course and whoever they bring in, may need to bring in to consult, or just themselves, and working with our design engineer, because we're going to need elements like cut and fill and places to store water, and places to use fill to kind of create the limits of where we're going to store water, and then get the water out of there, and then that's how we would kind of define those areas. And in those areas, then work to create the wetlands. To the extent that you can store water and create wetlands on, say, holes 13 and 15, there's probably the opportunity to play over, but I'm going to stop there because that's probably more these guys' purview.
Ruth?
But it's
Oh,
also
sorry.
something it's kind of going to be defined by how much flow we need to accommodate for a design event, which will probably be like the 2-year storm and the 10-year storm.
Okay, thank you.
Ruth, you had a question?
Yeah, when you talk about like starting after Labor Day, going till it gets too cold, and starting again, if you were to just collapse the non-work time, do you have an idea of like, is this a 3-month project? Is this really a 6-month project?
Yeah, and it's very weather dependent. I think we'll have some pretty good work time in September, October, November, and then December gets iffy and January gets iffier. I think for the golf course play, that first segment, unlike Traver where you're going along fairways, you're crossing right across the fairways. So the actual construction zone is fairly small. And I think the intention is to shorten up holes where you need to, but to keep play going through and over construction. Am I misspeaking on any of that?
I have a question. You mentioned that some of the bridges may be impacted, but that the funding, and this might be a question for Colin, I don't know, but the funding might, from the state revolving fund, might not cover that. So is there a plan for those bridges if they are impacted?
They're going to be available on eBay. They're probably too small to work into this project, and just like Traver, you would probably want water not to be flowing over them in a small event, which is probably what happens right now, or around them, causing erosion. So we would likely want a larger span, replacing something that was taken off to accommodate a stormwater project is an eligible cost, but there's probably going to be limits to, how what percentage of the project can be spent on that particular element.
I would say when we had the Leslie project, I believe in that all of the bridges were actually covered as a part of the stormwater fund costs. And we would obviously review designs for this and see what sort of impact it would have on our budget.
Yeah.
They would be, I would say, certainly smaller than the stuff that we have at Leslie for most of it.
Yes, yeah, and we preserved existing crossings at Leslie too. The thing with Leslie was that was under a floodplain permit as well, because there was
Yeah.
more than 2 square miles upstream, which made it something that you had to have certain clearance for the design event. So
It
it
is,
was
though,
easier to get them covered.
it is really a huge opportunity for parks, though, to do exactly what you were talking about, Stephen, about the areas of the course that are wet. I think we really have seen at Leslie, since those improvements, that areas that were traditionally underwater or wet are now not. They're in play as a significantly improved experience. And these would be very, very expensive improvements for us to make alone. So this is really a wonderful way for us to see improvements at the golf course while also being able to hit the goals of stormwater management and everything. So
Yeah.
I like Harry, and we're pleased about this.
And I think that's true, so as not to overpromise, that back area is very shaded, so the snow melt, I was just talking to Doug about this before the meeting, it takes a while to dry out, but it should be much better drained from underneath as we build the project.
Yes, Mike?
Most of the upstream watershed comes from residential neighborhoods. And also there's a central part of this between the golf courses that's also private property as well.
In the township, yeah.
How much does the participation of those either upstream or midstream neighbors affect the overall quality of the project?
Well, that is a dialogue that will start on October 1st. I think the project doesn't threaten use of the golf course and improves use of the golf course. I'm not sure what type of input we will get, but we'll certainly, accommodate whatever thoughts come at us. At the end of the day, we're going to wind up with a project that improves play on the golf course, improves water quality, improves safety, improves movement. If there is an interest in expanding the project beyond the golf course itself, that's something we could consider, but right now that island is just, that it's township, it's not city property. And upstream, it's all part of the stormwater system. In the end, this will be a Chapter 20 drain, so it will be incorporated in, just like the rest of the drainage projects in the city of Ann Arbor, the county drains in the city of Ann Arbor. It's pretty much an at-large stormwater assessment. So that part,
There won't be an individual assessment on these property owners
correct,
that are. in
correct. This will be a
watershed.
Chapter 20 drain, so it'll be assessed to the stormwater utility.
Okay.
Under the current rates, this project was, with that study, was built into the current rate structure.
Is there a time and place on that first meeting, location and time? Do you have it
October
figured out yet?
1st, 6 o'clock at the clubhouse?
Oh, okay, thank you.
There should be a press release out either at the end of this week or the start of next week. We try to have them out just maybe 10 days in advance or so.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you for coming today.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
I'll come back and report on it.
Moving on to reports, item 7A, report from Parks and Recreation Manager Colin.
Yep, so there was a late addition to your packet, which is the written report, which I won't review with all of you now because that would take a long time. It's pretty in-depth. But just kind of a handful of things to highlight. We have the ice rink is up and running at Vets Ice Arena, so it always feels like a strange time of year, that. And that also means that the swimming pools have closed. We stayed open for the additional 2 weeks again for Fuller Park Pool, which I think continues to be popular and quite well used. Also wanted just to take a second to say it's kind of the end of like the busy season in terms of Memorial Day to Labor Day. And the staff this year did a very good job in the sense of, at the swimming pools, we probably have about 100,000 visitors over the course of the summer. And out of those 100,000, we had perhaps a handful of rescues. And it's important, obviously, to us to always focus on the safety. And lifeguards, the staff that we have there throughout the year, they have training sessions, they continue to work on their skills, they enforce the rules proactively, and I think it really does show in the fact that we're able to get through an incredibly busy summer and all of our users were safe. That is also the case for the day camps. We had over 1,800 campers signed up this year, and again, it went really, really smooth, so I mean, I can't say enough about the staff that spend their time on that throughout the summer. I wanted also to share, last night, Leslie Science Nature Center, the remediation plan was passed by council unanimously. So full support of the work that has to take place at Leslie, and that will really start kicking off tomorrow. We should have an update for you again in October or November for sure. And there was a large portion of that was actually funded by the Brownfield grant, which we're excited to obviously have received that, and that was, the work to get that was also done very quickly. So I think things are progressing as well as they can. Staff continue to work with Leslie Science Nature Center in the interim for other locations for the programs that they continue to have. And I think we've been able to accommodate really the vast majority of them. So it's worked out perhaps the best that it can. 2 events, just to remind you, we have on September 29th at the Veterans Memorial Park is the flagpole ceremony. I believe the American Legion was here last month and shared with you about that project. That is on September 29th at 2 o'clock at Vets. If you are able to make it, if you could let us know, that would be appreciated. And there's an exciting event on Friday at the Farmers Market. It's their 100th birthday, as I think you know. And there is a farm-to-table event where there'll be good food by local chefs with local food, $100 a ticket for a table, and there's a grant which goes towards supporting small businesses. There are still some seats available, but not a ton. So if you're interested, sign up, please. That's everything.
Okay.
That's enough.
Thank you, Colin. Does anyone have any questions?
When's the flagpole
September 29th, which is a Sunday at 2 o'clock.
Great, thank you. Item 7B, report from Recreation Advisory Commission. Ruth is here today.
We don't meet over the summer, and the next meeting is the 24th. So look to me next week, next
Great.
month.
Okay, great. We'll look forward to an October report. Item 7C, we don't have any reports from other relevant commissions, committees, boards, or task forces. So moving on to regular business. Item 8A, a resolution to recommend approval of a construction change order with Gerace Construction Company for the Gettys Dam Gate Recoding and Repairs Project and amend the project budget. And we have Glenn Wazorek
Yes.
with us today, a senior utilities engineer, to talk about the project.
Thank you. I'm sorry I don't bring good news today. That's my intro. I thought I'd quickly review the scope of this project just to get us all on the same page again. We were rehabbing the 3 gates out at the Gettys Dam. And the first steps in doing that was the installation of the stop logs. Gerace, the contractor, pulls these gates out, takes them back to a shop in Midland where they sandblast it, abrasive blast it. And that would allow then for a structural inspection to assess the condition of the gates, recommend repairs, improvements, things like that. So that is in fact what's been done so far. Back in July, Gerace removed the first gate, gate number 3, had it blasted up in Midland, and we went up there on July 30th to perform the structural assessment. And while we knew there were some issues with the removal of the corrosion and the existing coatings, it allowed for a detailed inspection, and some of our findings are very concerning. So real briefly, I threw in some pictures so you guys can kind of see some of the issues at hand. This first slide shows some significant section loss in the structural steel. The arrows are pointing to some of the actual loss of the material. So we're looking at like 50% loss, 60% loss of these structural members. So these are major structural components of the dam, and obviously that loss is a problem. We also discovered some areas of bent structural members, and while these don't necessarily represent an immediate cause for failure or concern, they point to, I'm speculating a little bit, but probably some ice damage in the winter, but things that still nevertheless should be corrected now that we're at this stage of the project. Some other pictures. Once the abrasive blasting took place, that really highlighted how thin some of these members are. This is sandblast media that just punched right through these steel members. These are at important structural connections too, which further complicates the matter. And unfortunately, these are just 2 pictures of many areas with these holes, this deterioration clear through the structural steel. Also noted was significant pitting of steel, gouging of the steel plate, things like that. These are things that are not repairable, while some of it not an immediate cause of concern. It's nevertheless something that probably should not go back in now that we've got the gate out. And lastly, just some failed components. I have a picture here of one of the rollers. These are the rollers that allow the gate to slide up and down, and all the rollers are frozen, corroded together, and requires further work. So we've looked at this every possible way, and it just comes to the recommendation that at this point, it's far easier and cost-effective and efficient to rebuild the gates in their entirety. Start with new materials, have the contractor just start from scratch. Just as an example, like the alternative, to continue along this repair path, the contractor first has to pull all these components apart. And then what is he left with? He's left with a steel plate that has a lot of corrosion in it, and then he has to somehow cut out pieces and repair it, and then put all these components back together. There's, as far as looking at those two options, repair versus rebuild, it's clear that it's more cost-effective, time-efficient to rebuild. So the recommendation was to rebuild and replace the gates in their entirety in lieu of repairing. And the bottom line cost impacts here, because we have worked with the contractor to develop proposals. The short of it is that once we credit back the contract for work that's not needed, now that we're proposing to potentially rebuild, the net increase per Gerace is $281,417. The last line there also increasing construction contingency. That is just to put us back in line with the recommended 10% construction contingency for the cost of the total project. However, with rebuilding of the gates, one would hope that you're reducing a lot of the risk because you're starting new, you're starting with new materials. Nevertheless, this is the breakdown. This is how we get to the recommendation to council for the potential change order for $281,000. The impacts to the schedule, we're right now currently on the council agenda for October 7th. We were pushing this as best as possible in an effort to keep the contractor moving, keep the project moving. It's perfect time as far as winter construction goes. They can do all this work inside their shop throughout the winter, and the project completion moves from, like, we had this mid-June date to probably September sometime of next year. So that's the brief summary. Certainly by any means, we're open for questions.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, Ravina.
Okay, my question is, can you remind us how old the previous gate was? And then with a new potential gate, how long do you think that would serve our community?
So these gates were installed in 1972, I believe. So they have lasted an extraordinarily long time. With maintenance, such as painting and repairs, these gates will last easily the same, if not longer, if the painting sequence is maintained. Staying on top of the coatings is the key issue with all of that. So the one bright side to all of this is that we're eliminating something that has reached the end of its service life, that is very clear. In fact, gates 1 and 2 are worse than this one that we pulled out, and that's the unnerving part of all of this. But we start with new. Gate 4 is new, and while we will have a painting frequency of something on the order of 15 years or so, these gates ought to last in excess of 50 years again.
Good question. Ruth?
So, I'm totally in favor of doing this, and it feels like the news I got from my car last week, you know. But my question is, I think when this came back, when this came to us, however many months ago it was, I think we discussed this, and I just want to, the possibility that actually we might need to start with new rather than repairing. So just looking back, do you feel like we were just being kind of overly optimistic and hopeful, or as I was with my car, or?
The contractor's base bid, I'm going to have to ballpark, I'm afraid, but I think it was on the order of $600,000. And we threw in over $200,000 in contingencies, knowing that there were going to be issues with the structural steel. Even on top of those, what we all were hoping were conservative estimates, the deterioration has far exceeded the contingency that we had in place.
Right, I understand that, and I don't actually think that this change order is that big, like I thought it could have been worse. But I'm just wondering, when we were looking at this months ago, should the answer have been to go straight to replacement?
I
8
think
months
we can
ago.
always, in this type of situation, we can always ask the contractor to submit multiple bids for different scenarios. And it may be something in the future when we do work at Argo that's a question we ask at the outset. The only problem would be that we still don't know until they take the gates off.
Right, yeah, and that's really, that's what I'm asked, thank you, is what lessons could we
Yeah.
learn for the next
Yep.
time?
I'll also,
No, go ahead, Colin.
yeah,
Bob.
I was only going to add, I think it's been about 10 years that both Argo Dam and Geddes Dam have been recreational dams and kind of the responsibility of parks. And one of the things which I do feel really good about is the staff at the water department, the engineers and utility workers there, every year they do actually quite a bit of maintenance on the dams at Argo and at Geddes. So I mean, I feel pretty confident as we move forward that whatever ongoing sort of maintenance on an annual basis even will be done. These are just extremely old and predate a lot, so.
Bob?
So the gates go into something, right? I mean, there's a structure around the gates.
Yes, it's concrete.
It's all
Yeah,
concrete.
right.
All right, so we're not worried about corrosion and whatever the
Concrete-
gate sits in, and I know
Right.
the concrete won't.
The concrete often requires repairs at some point also. Barton and Superior are two very good examples of that, where we have very large projects coming up to repair the concrete there. Both Geddes and Argo, we have performed some of those repairs as preventative maintenance to keep a small project small and keep it from getting large. And that work has been done over the past few years. So there is no significant concrete project forthcoming anytime real soon.
Okay.
Stephen, did you have a question?
Yeah, just
or
trying to
comment?
make sure I understand. So we pulled out gate 3, sandblasted it, it looks not usable. We're not gonna pull out gate 1 and 2 and sandblast them and check just for fun. We're pretty confident that we need to replace all 3. and that this additional monies is going for all three. I just wanna make sure we're not buying one gate and then next month, oh, look, gate number 1 and gate number 2 are in worse condition.
It is certain that all three gates are in need of complete rebuild, that they cannot be repaired.
And that's-
Despite,
This covers all three.
yes. Yes.
Great question. Lauren?
I don't know if you know the answer to this. Do we, apart from it, their extreme age, do we know why the corrosion is so much worse than we imagined it would be at this point? Should we be concerned about the water quality, that kind of thing?
No, this is just time and very difficult, harsh environmental conditions. You know, the water and the cold temperatures and the sunlight and the freeze thaw and the continuous flow of water, the mist that freezes, you know, all these things are really tough on concrete and on coatings. And there's just time takes over.
Yep.
Painting of the gates is really the best means to protect something long-term. So establishing a good program for that is the best effort.
Yeah. That's where we're good.
Oh, no, if everyone else gets to be first time, I do too.
Julie.
It's like my one place. So I just a comment, thank you for coming. I feel badly like you felt like you needed to apologize. So please don't, like it's breaking my heart watching you up there. So, yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad that you were able to come and appreciate that we tried to do it in a way that would be preventative, and it can't be, and that happens when you open up old structures. And so, I'm confident that we'll go forward with a strong preventative maintenance plan going forward. I think
Thank
that's
you.
the way a lot of the infrastructure is happening in the city. We learn and then we do preventative maintenance and change the way we do things. So, so thank you for coming. I know that's not fun to be the bearer of bad news.
Thank
But
you.
please don't apologize.
Sure.
Yes, Bob?
Yeah, but given that Parks is now going to have to maintain the recreational dams, I'd like to make sure that we're aware of the maintenance schedules and things like that, so that we can help do our due diligence and oversight.
Good. Any other comments or questions at this time? Okay, everyone has a resolution that was included in their packet.
Well, wait, I guess I do have
Oh,
another question.
sure. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
how are we going to pay for it?
So we have available funds this fiscal year in capital, specifically for bridges and dams. So it's there in the capital budget. We do not need to go to fund balance in order to fund it. Looking ahead to Argo, it's, I think, maybe a good time just to remember we will have recognized additional revenue from the fee that we charge
Right.
for the river users. There is a portion of this is actually being paid by that. And then there's also written into the regulations for the PUD for the Broadway development, like the DTE development, I suppose I should say. There has been an ask to include funds for the maintenance of the Argo Dam, which is obviously right upstream of it and
Right.
creates the land that it's on. So those things look pretty good. I feel pretty positive about. So I think we'll hopefully need a little bit less of this for those.
Any other comments or questions? Yes.
This is from the vendor, that this is how it goes, but there's some kind of initial coatings warranty and everything coming out of that shop up there. I know coatings are better than they used to be. I'm a painter. But, like, they give us some kind of warranty for the work and so on, that it's gonna fit when they show up with it and
Yes,
et cetera?
absolutely. And we're going with a very specialized coating system. It's the same coatings that's used on elevated tanks and ground storage tanks to slow and reduce the amount of corrosion.
Yeah, I wish it was like my 95 4Runner, where Toyota, for 4 years, they did a lifetime rust through and they wrote me a check for my poor Forerunner. I had to give it up. But, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Right. Any other comments or questions about the resolution? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Bob, seconded by Mike. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Next time, bring some good news.
Moving on to item 8B. Also included in your packet, you have a resolution to recommend plan for Parks Fairness Funds. And Colin and I are going to talk a bit about this before we have discussion. Do you want to start with background?
Sure. So we get to speak about relatively good news.
Yeah.
As a part of the administrative policy for the millage, there's language in there that essentially says if the general fund operating budget of the city increases, that the parks general fund operating budget needs to increase at that same percentage. And that's what has resulted in previous years to a more modest increase to the parks operating budget. For example, I think last year the amount was maybe $45,000 or $50,000. And in that case, the monies were allocated for an operating expense to do the outdoor ice rinks. This year, the amount is significantly more. Of course, I've not got it in front of me. I think it's
It's
$392,000.
$389,168.
Yep. So it's $389,000, and the idea is to provide kind of a recommendation as to how to utilize those new funds in I think, both responsible way and also at projects where we can get, I think a lot of users and make sure that it's available for people across the parks as well as possible. So there are a handful of recommendations. I don't know if you want to go through those or.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think what Colin said is really key is we spent some time thinking about how this money can make a large impact on a large number of people across different areas of our park system. So we're recommending it be allocated in 4 different areas. The first is to CAN, the Community Action Network. Second, to the Ann Arbor Skate Park to help with the funding of adding lights at the skate park, which we've all heard about Unpack. Third, for future bridge repairs to the car bridge at Gallup, which we know is an upcoming need as its lifespan is nearing its end. And then the 4th recommendation is to hold some of the remaining money until our May 2020 PAC meeting so that we can have some time to best evaluate partway through the year how we should use that. So I open it up to discussion, questions, comments. Ruth?
Just a question, is this like funding for this year and we don't know if it would happen again next year?
Right.
Right.
It is entirely dependent upon what amendments occur to the overall operating budget for the city.
Yes. Pravina, did you have a
Yeah,
question?
my question is about number 1. Can you speak more about that? Because that's something that I wasn't aware that our funding supported the CAN.
Yeah, so the Community Action Network operates the Bryant and also Northside Community Centers for Parks and Recreation. And they've been doing that now for probably close on 8 or 9 years. There's a contract that was kind of before PAC a little while ago where the amount that we fund them, we actually raised from $130,000 up to $150,000. And that was very much in part because the services that have been provided over the years have increased and their annual amount stayed the same. So that was a really good thing to do as a part of the last budget was the increase for $20,000. Unfortunately, they received a reduction from the Washtenaw County of Community and Economic Development in the amount of $18,150. So where we thought we had kind of moved them up a fair bit, after that happened, not so much. So that's the reason to recommend the additional funds. Yep.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Rachel.
Are there any restrictions to how these funds can be spent?
For specifically at the community center or
No,
just?
just in general, this basically one-time bonus.
Right.
Is there a restriction to how we can allocate it or spend it?
I suppose the only restriction really is that they be spent on the parks. So how that happens is kind of what's before you now. I will say in the past, usually the number hasn't been large enough to consider doing what we're recommending here, which is to help to fund two capital projects. And I think that's a very helpful thing for us to be able to do. We know, for example, that we will have to replace the bridge for Gallup. That's going to be an incredibly expensive project. The good news is we know that kind of a number of years out, so we can begin to plan for it, and everything we do like this will make that a little bit easier when we get there. I think for the skate park, you know, it's just a highly, highly popular amenity which is available for use for everybody. It's no charge. We've seen how heavily it has been used. Whatever we can do to encourage people to get outside, you know, to spend their time recreating, using that amenity, I think the lights would just be a really, really positive thing for that.
So speaking of the skate park lights, would this, I looked at the numbers, so this would then allow for purchasing and implementation or install of the lights. I think this is, I agree that it's being used a lot, and it's also safety at night, or once the weather's still warm in the fall, but it gets dark really early. I think safety is really important for us.
Yeah, it'll extend the season, the usable kind of amount of that amenity, so it's great. And then the skate park, what are they? The Friends of the Ann Arbor Skate Park. They've already started to fundraise for it. They have, I think, $20,000 to $25,000 already raised for it. There's kind of a rough idea that it might be about 100 to 125, so I think it puts us in a good position to move ahead with it.
Bob, did you have another comment?
I want to know how much they had raised, because
Oh.
I think that we're actually, I mean, the fundraising will end when they see this.
Maybe. I think we need to find out, you know,
Yeah.
after we get the designer in to look at all of the different elements of
Okay.
it. But I think there's some other amenities that could go kind of with it. to
Yeah, that's sort
increase
of
it.
where I was going, is
Yeah.
that for the basic need of it, I mean, I agree that it serves a lot of people, but again, I'm now concerned about repairing a dam and spending money on lights for a project that is already raising money for lights, all right? But if we're going beyond that, if they're gonna do something to add to it, then I see a place for us. But I'd like them to be able to continue raising money for, because it is free to use. So, I'm not against it, I just wanted to know where we were going with it.
Thank you. Yes, Mike.
On that same level, I could probably get more enthusiastically behind such a big number if we were talking about some of the sustainability or energy efficiency or dark sky improvements that
Yep.
we've been talking about a lot, both here and in Environmental Commission, and also from what I hear from Energy Commission as well. So it would be a great opportunity for us to look at how the park system could be a leader in trying to bring some of this daylighting to outdoor spaces in a way that, you know, won't make you go like this when you're standing across Vets Park and you're looking at this thing on a winter's evening.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think that's a great idea. I don't know if it would be, we could amend kind of a resolve clause to include something along the lines of, with a view to sustainability practices, et cetera.
Yeah, and actually mentioning those dark sky improvements could be, it would be nice to put that in there because those actually have meaning now. It's a relatively new field, but basically, just to give all of you on the same page, because this is a presentation that we heard about in Environmental Commission, when you go outside and you are looking at a light bulb at night, it is reducing your potential for safety, because it takes 20 or 30 seconds for the proteins in the eye to be able to respond to that bright light. So you're getting a temporary blindness outdoors when you see an unexposed light bulb. By covering up these bulbs and lighting things, you don't get that retinal disturbance. So you're not looking at that blinding light bulb, and you're actually able to see people and things in the environment much better than you would see with our traditional street lighting and traditional outdoor lighting.
Great. Julie, did you have a
Oh, yeah, thanks. Just to add on to, my understanding is, I think a lot of the new lights that have been installed lately are, for streetlights, for example, have been in line with those guidelines, so using the contrast and dark sky practices. So excellent reminder. And I think we have some good models already with some of our newer light installations that have happened in other areas in the city.
Great point. So is it best to move forward with an amendment to the resolution? In the whereas clause, the Ann Arbor Skate Park is a world-class popular facility used virtually year-round for no charge. Would we like?
My instinct is that we probably don't need to change the resolution in order to ultimately have a project that meets the criteria that Mike's just described, that's something that comes out as the bids come in and park
That's a
staff
great
is
point.
sifting
Right.
what the right resolution is. Because I don't even think the Friends of the Skate Park have articulated what their vision would be completely yet either. Maybe it makes sense. I just don't want to get bogged down on the wording when we're actually going to solve it later on.
That's true.
That's a great point, because, Colin, it will come back to PAC, correct?
Yeah, it will have to come back to PAC
Bids and
once.
designs are
Yep.
out.
Yeah, because it'll for sure be over $25,000, so at that time, it would come back to you. But I can certainly take the notes tonight, and
Yes.
when we start to meet with the skate park group about this, make sure that this is a large part of what we're talking about as we actually bid out the work for the electric work. I think it'd be great, because it would also be a highly visible place to
Yes.
promote and educate the skate park. We've been actually quite successful with that for stormwater. There's going to be some additional signage coming out there, which has kind of a comic book character, which is going to explain how the stormwater goes through the skate park. I could see something educational tied in with this too, from the sustainability standpoint. I think it could have a big impact, so.
Great. And we do have a commissioner now. We have Rachel on the Friends of the Skate Park.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
yeah. Great. Any other comments or questions about the resolution? Rachel?
Yeah, I had a question for Colin. I was wondering if there was anything that the park staff needs. I don't know whether or not this is something to be considered. I don't even know if it's appropriate. But you
Yeah.
have a hardworking staff. Earlier in this meeting, you commented that they're doing a great job. Is there anything we need to consider to keep them doing well and staying here?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'll answer it a couple of different ways. One is we're still pretty new into kind of the budget year, so the budget that we prepared should, all things being equal, should cover kind of the staff costs and the level that we have. We are starting to work with the Human Resources Department to do a reevaluation of all of the pay rates for all of the seasonal workers that we have. That's something that we do every 3 or 4 years. If that does suggest that we need to raise those rates to actually be competitive, that would be something that we would come back to PAC with. The only problem using this money for that is this is not recurring, while that would be.
Yeah, I was thinking more if there were purchases, programs,
Yeah.
trainings, materials that they have
Yep.
been hoping to have. If you look at it as a one-time surplus, it could be a way to meet needs that are oftentimes unseen.
Yep, I appreciate that, and I think that's kind of a reason, in part, why we have the last part of the resolution says to
thought so.
hold a little bit of money until May. Oftentimes what we'll find, and actually years past, we had a smaller amount one year for fairness resolution, but we needed an additional van and trailer for the canoe liveries because they were, they kept on kind of growing and growing, so it was a way to do that. So I think when we come back in May, I imagine staff will come with both a operational list of needs that could be considered, and then we could also see if between kind of now and then, are there any capital opportunities that have actually come up, as a result of any properties or something like that.
Great, yes.
So are these funds actually committed? So, like, we make this resolution, and let's say we go back, we find out skate park is earned twice as much as we thought, or whatever, fundraised twice as much. And so they only need 80,000 now, or whatever. So, when is that actually commitment? Like, I know we're saying this is a suggestion, but then at some
So-
point, those funds are gonna be committed to these various
So the funds,
uses.
when the budget was passed by council at the second meeting in May, all of those funds come into the city, come into the Parks Administrative General Fund, and they're held there. And then, as we spend them for the different projects, it would move out to those particular budgets.
So it's just as the projects come to fruition?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things, because it is in the general fund, what we would do is we would take those revenues, for example, let's say for kind of the bridge repairs, the $140-something thousand. Those monies would be allocated toward that particular project at this time.
I would just had a flash on those showers that we were talking about that day, at the liveries.
Yeah.
They're like surfer showers or something. We weren't sure what they were gonna cost, and it's a potential sort of windfall for that, a project that's small like that, but
Yeah, and that could very well be something when we come back in May, see how that's kind of working out. So, yeah.
Yes, Ruth.
If we're ready, I want to move it.
Great, okay, all right. Great discussion. We have a motion by Ruth, a second by Pravina. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great, the motion passes. Thank you all. Moving on to item 9, land acquisition matters. We do have a need for a LAC meeting, so we will move into the council workroom, and once we're in there, we'll begin an open session and then move into closed session.
Don't we ask for public comments in the LAC section before we go in, or do we do that?
We do it in there. Josh and I,
You guys figured this out?
we have figured it out since last month.
Nicole and I have been sharing notes.
It's a lot for her, too.
I know. And her description is like an iceberg, like you think you knew what you were getting into, but every time you go to a meeting, you learn something new.
Or you learn what she.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I'm on some emergency alert thing now.
And acquisition meeting. And we do have a motion coming out of our land acquisition committee meeting, which I invite Ruth to read.
Okay, the motion's to recommend city acquisition of fee title to 4.95 acres of property identified in application ID 2019-01 with seller's conditions and approval of the contribution of funds not to exceed $180,500 from the open space and parkland preservation millage.
Great, do we have a second?
Mike.
Second.
Seconded by Mike, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Great, the motion passes. Thank you. Item 10, second public comment. Seeing no members of the public currently, move on to communications. They are all in your packet. We don't have a need for another closed session, so item 13, we stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
This is the next meeting.